6th, the Trump administration was scheduled to undertake a review of what actions Dominica has taken or failed to take to address U.S. concerns that led to U.S. visa restrictions on Dominica. Here are some talking points or questions, if you like. Is the Trump administration still undertaking a review this month of what actions Dominica has taken or failed to take to address U.S. concerns that led to visa restrictions on the island, or are visa restrictions set for 1 year in the first instance already? What further acts, what further sanctions might the U.S. government conceivably impose if Dominica does not take the necessary corrective actions with respect to the CBI program as requested by the Trump administration? What is the situation with the deportees from the U.S. federal government that are supposed to be accepted by Dominica? The Gregor Nassif experience in the unsuccessful renewal of his visa confirms that Dominica is indeed under U.S. visa sanctions. Should the CBI program be re-engineered and the requisite due diligence placed completely in the hands of an outside independent bona fides competent agency to fix that issue? So we look forward to the contributions of Justice Dr. Irving Andre, former Dominica UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, prominent businessman and entrepreneur Mr. Gregor Nassif, political scientist Professor Alex Bruno, social scientist Simeon Joseph, on this three-segment discussion. So as usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help us give our usual huge shout out and big thank you to our farmers, our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, public and private sector patriots, and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. We welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home in Dominica or in the region or globally. Thank you, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air. Thank you, Lambi, on the console directing the traffic. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. Each panelist will divide their contributions into 5-minute presentations and will get to make closing remarks. I go now to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his first comments on part one of tonight's discussion. What is the status of the Trump administration review of what actions Dominica has taken or failed to take to address U.S. concerns that has led to U.S. visa restrictions on Dominica? Over to you, Dr. Andre.
Let me say good evening to the panelists, esteemed, distinguished panelists. Good evening to your listeners. Good evening to Lambi. Good evening to Sherwin. Good evening to yourself, Mr. Gregoire, and to anyone who I have missed. Let me say that these topics require some sober reflection. The first question you ask, what is the status of the U.S. review with respect to the actions Dominica has taken or failed to take? The bottom line is this: if past is prologue, if history teaches us anything, we will be suggesting that the U.S., quite frankly, will continue to have these concerns about Dominica's involvement in the CBI program, so insofar as it relates to the sale of passports. Why? Because the sale of passports was embraced by this administration for the tremendous amount of monies it generated. But not only that, that was not the only attraction. That wasn't even the main attraction. Remember Al Jazeera. Remember what they told us? They told us that the political directorate, they pocketed 90% of the net proceeds of sale, and only 10% goes to the island of Dominica, at least near to the benefit of Dominicans. That is the underlying context of this discussion, and the U.S. knew it. But secondly, the U.S. had two concerns, and Europe, I should indicate. One, the security concerns. Why security concerns? Because they have an overwhelming amount of evidence that disproportionately those who are benefiting from the sale or purchase of Dominican passports, including diplomatic passports, are so-called dodgy persons who either have criminal records, persons who are fleeing justice in other countries, persons who have been aligned to dictatorships all over the place. These persons, whether you call them Maduike, whether you call them Corralo, whether you call them other names, whatever those names are, these are the persons who have grabbed the spotlight in terms of Dominica's, say, CBI program. These have created significant concerns in England, in the United States, in Europe. Remember in England, one notorious criminal who had been denied entry into Britain was able to acquire a Dominican diplomatic passport or passport, whichever it was, and enter England as if he was, quite frankly, entitled to do so with impunity. So this is the backdrop over which we have this discussion. But why is the sale of passports so attractive to the political directorate? And this takes us to the other main concern. Much of the money is not being deposited into the consolidated fund. The Europeans made that a condition precedent for any legitimacy with respect to any CBI program. The net proceeds must be accounted for and placed in the consolidated fund. That is the most significant attraction to the Dominican political directorate. Remember what Zampoli told us, and he should know, he was intimately involved in it. He told us that much of the money is being secreted and hidden in mysterious accounts, whether in England, whether in Switzerland, or in other territories, certainly in Dubai. And that is the central attraction. Now, you don't have to agree with me, those who are listening to me, but go ask those who've been given apartments. Ask them to show you their certificate of ownership with no conditions attached. They do not have it, because the whole purpose of these enterprises is to basically trap the persons in a web of perpetual poverty or perpetual allegiance to the political directorate. So this whole business of the sale of passports, quite frankly, is not being run to benefit Dominicans. Many Dominican businesses who could certainly use legitimate help from the net proceeds of these sales are being left out. Some have benefited. Some long-established hoteliers, they have benefited because, quite frankly, at least some of them have a track record for legitimate businesses. Very few. Others do not. Go to Portsmouth and look at a wonderful, beautiful hotel called Inishi, and you'll understand what I'm saying. Even go to the one that going to Tukari. A judicial officer who I work with went to Dominica and stayed at that hotel, and he came, he was shocked. He said he felt like he was a ghost in a ghost town. He was the only guest at that hotel, quite frankly. So we know that the purposes for which these funds, the vast majority of funds are being used and utilized, is not genuinely to develop Dominica. It is a slush fund to give away, quite frankly, in and to be hidden in enterprises that do not inure to the benefit of Dominica. And therein lies the problem. And therein lies the US fundamental control over these programs. Dominica always appears on the top 5 in terms of restrictions to the United States. Quite frankly, every indication is that those restrictions are going to remain. And the saddest part of it, the biggest persons who will be affected adversely are Dominicans. Obviously, we know about the sad case of Gregor. You know, at least he can boast that he has a track record in terms of his hotel industries in Dominica, in terms of providing employment and generating income. The others cannot, and they do not. And the US, quite frankly, is perfectly aware of what's happening. What have we done to correct these deficiencies? Precious little. Because why? The monies are being used to enrich persons who have no experience in hoteling, for God's sakes. For the most part, it is being used to fatten the personal portfolios of persons who play ball with the government. That is the problem. And the US is perfectly aware of it. What Dominicans get, quite frankly, are the remnants, a small residue of this funding. The biggest beneficiaries are not Dominicans, quite frankly. They are foreigners. This is the saddest part of it. Whether through no bid contract funding or contracts, for God's sakes, whether it's spending $200 million on a geothermal facility and then farming out to a foreign interest, for God's sakes, who is going to benefit? Dominicans? Because these companies will be guaranteed a certain return. And where is all the hoopla about geothermal benefit in Dominica? So In my view, as negative as it sounds, the Dominican government will not take any measures that would give any assurance to the United States that Dominica should be removed from that list of countries whose citizens face suspensions, who, quite frankly, and it's discriminating against legitimate people and so on. I mean, Gregor is just one of the most notorious examples. But what about those who want to go and visit their children in the United States who are studying? What about those who may need medical attention they can't get at, what's the name of the hospital again? The Chinese Dominican Friendship, you say? Hospital. What about those who haven't been buffeted by the winds of privilege? What do they do? What alternative do they have? So the government will not take the remedial steps that are necessary. Instead, the government will be focused on trying to placate the United States. That's why they accepted, or they agreed to accept, what, 27 refugees per year, is that it? That's what they told us, but we don't know as yet because we haven't seen any of these books. So rather than taking those remedial steps to make the CBI program inure to the benefit of Dominicans, and certainly Dominican business people and so on, the hoteliers, the Garis, Anthony Martin, and others who will not see a penny. Why? What have they done? Because they had the audacity to oppose the political directorate. This CBI program has fed the climate of victimization and persecution of persons. And to that extent, we are not the beneficiaries of such a program. To that extent, the Dominican government will make no significant changes to the program, to cleanse the program, because quite frankly, the money being generated, the majority of the money being generated, go into the pockets, or should I say the bank accounts, or the investment projects of the political directorate in Dubai and elsewhere. And persons will have to be content to live in substandard apartment buildings, substantial building with deficient sewage systems. Look, think about Egbert Charles. Think about those other contractors in Dominica who've built edifices which are still standing up proud, a testament to Dominica's ability in the construction industry. And we have been told that we have to be satisfied with substandard housing built either by cronies or by foreigners. And we have to just accept it without any protest. So in summary, the government has done precious little to placate the concerns, not just of the United States, but also of England and of Europe, in terms of the problems endemic in the CBI program. And who is the biggest loser? Dominica as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. Well said. Gregor, let me just welcome you especially to the Global View on Q. This is your first time on this program. I hope this will not be your last time here. I hope you had a great Father's Day. And your thoughts on this in part one of the topic here tonight.
Sheridan, good night. Thanks. Would like to say greetings to the panelists and to the audience. It's a pleasure to be here. It's 2 o'clock where I am, so if I'm a little bit hazy or blurry, forgive me. Yeah. So, firstly, the experience that I had definitely reconfirmed for me, based on the person that I spoke to, that the restrictions are in effect, and that was the reasons. I maybe should not have been surprised. I maybe should not have even tried. But more and more people will feel this, and it's very tough. My concern is more for the young man who has a scholarship who can't get a visa, the person that needs healthcare, the family that's being kind of split in half based on this, and it will impact more and more people as visas start to expire. There was the intent of a review in June. I'm not sure that any of us can speak to whether that will take place or not. I think it would have been good at some point to speak to the foreign office to understand their view on this. But I think there is hope and there is expectation that there will be something. I really cannot say for sure. I also think it's important to visit the stated reason for this. So the US stated that it was the CBI program in terms of the concerns they had, and they made specific reference to a genuine link between the economic citizens and Dominica. But one also has to question then why only Dominica and Antigua, and why not the other three CBI jurisdictions who have very similarly structured programs. So it does also raise questions about what the unstated reasons are, which may be the geopolitical alliances that Dominica and Antigua have in terms of Cuba and China and Venezuela and so on. So I can't say for sure, but it is odd that only 2 of the 5 were ban was applied to, while the genuine link issue or question is exactly the same for all 5. Yeah. In terms of what is being done with the program, as we know, there is an independent authority that is being formed. I think it's being facilitated by the ECCB, where in the future investigations, sanctions, the authority to blacklist will be with an independent authority, which I think is a very, very positive thing. That is something that I had actually suggested since 2019. In terms of the need to reform the program, I think there is a dire need to do that. Something that's not often discussed is the discounting or the selling of citizenship at less than the regulated price, which we as a country engaged in and continue to engage in significantly. And what that does is it quadruples or it significantly increases the volumes of citizenships that are being issued. If citizenship is supposed to be sold for 250,000 and it's being sold for 100,000, then your market basically triples. More and more persons can afford it. And I think the revocation of the UK visa-free access, the risk of the EU visa-free access, and what has happened now with the US, I feel quite certain that is a part of it. The volume of citizenships that are being issued, and the fact that the underselling continues to be such a major issue for the program shows that we're not able to properly manage and to control and to enforce the regulations of the program. And I think that there is a significant concern that if we're not able to properly and to control the program, then things like the due diligence will certainly come into question. And I think the lack of transparency on the use of funds. I mean, prior to the hurricane, it was often said that there was a significant a reserve of funds that had been contributed by the citizenship program. So prior to 2017, for me, there was no question that at least the majority of funds flowing into the treasury. But after the hurricane, and those funds were obviously used for the reconstruction, but with the surge of the infrastructure projects, the housing and the airport projects and so on, what we saw is the majority of the funds being channeled through third-party developers, and the Treasury, in my view, was not the primary beneficiary of the program once those projects started. And unfortunately, with the lack of transparency of how the funds were being used, creates a lot of suspicion. So in my mind, the citizenship program has an important place for the development of the country if it is well run and it's well structured. And I think we're way past the need to reform and to restructure the program, so much so that I think the program is a very significant risk and has been for some time. So I'm really not sure if we are still in time to do what needs to be done to salvage the program for the future. But I think that the program, if it is well structured, can be of significant benefit to the country.
Well, thank you so much for your opening remarks there, Gregor. Thank you so much. Now let's just continue with Simeon. Simeon, your thoughts on this part one of this program that we're talking about here tonight? You know, the sanctions. Yeah, your mic is muted. You need to unmute your mic. You're still muted. Okay, you're good now.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay.
Well, so thank you very much, Mr. Gregor, and good night to you and your listeners and fellow panelists. It's a good day to be alive. It's a good day to be a Dominican, but sometimes one struggles with that attribute when one considers basically the state of many things in Dominica and particularly the CBI. So I want to thank Dr. Andre for his introduction and and also Mr. Nassif for his sharing out. I think I want to be very brief this evening, and I would want to look at this whole scenario in terms of what we would need to look at in terms of our international relations and travel policies that come out of this. Towards the end of Mr. Nassif's deliberations a while ago, he mentioned two words to me, and the words were risk and salvage. And quite frankly, this is not something to hear, that one wants to hear, particularly with regard to anything about one's country. And when we have to think of the seal of our sovereignty and the fact that this is Dominica we're talking about. And so what I'd like to say, I think very briefly, is this has generated a lot of ongoing discussions regarding our island Dominica international relations, and most specifically, our structural integrity of our democratic process, okay? When we look at the status of the United States review, and if we had to link it to what we'll be discussing earlier, we need to be mindful of the stakes that are before us, particularly when we have to relate it to upcoming by-elections in Dominica and the dynamics that go with when we consider everything about this passport and CBI and the ban on Dominicans, the travel ban on Dominicans, etc. And so we need to look, first of all, at how has that affected our international relations and what travel policy review that is necessary for Dominica. this has raised, no doubt, a lot of security protocols. And one of the things that we have to look at and examine is the border integrity of Dominica as well. We are very concerned that in terms of a lot of, we don't know who hundreds of people out there having Dominican passports and their backgrounds, etc. The breach of security protocols that may occur, but also we need to think of many of these people having Dominican passports, us not knowing who they are. And we heard recently the Prime Minister saying that they have to come to Dominica. And so when they come to Dominica, I think we need to question and examine what will be the effect of the border integrity of Dominica. Who's going to come to Dominica? Who are these people? What is their background? So not only there needs to be concern for the security protocols of Britain and the United States and the Schengen countries, etc., but based on our lack of knowledge of, as I said, where these people come from, the border integrity of Dominica. You know, a lot of Dominicans make noise about Haitians coming to Dominica, etc., etc. We know who the Haitians are. We know what causes them to come to Dominica. The next question we have to ask is, who are these people when they come to Dominica? What will be their background? And what will be the effects? And how is that going to affect our society in general? And so what I think that raises further question is are we putting in place a proper review framework? Okay, in spite of all these diplomatic things that are happening, what is the authentic and necessary review framework that needs to be put in place to ensure that Dominica is in compliance with international security standards, and that the people coming to Dominica as well are not in breach of our national security standards? These are important questions we have to look at. When I hear the word risk, you know, and mindful of the fact that not enough information has been shared, there are many agreements that have been signed we don't know about, you know, to what extent have our travel documents be properly managed? Okay, the risk of the change of visa policies that would come out of all of those things, we need to be concerned. So that is the first thing we need to look at and review all the framework in terms of our national compliance, our security standards, and all those things. The other thing we have to think of, and I would want us to look at tonight, are the diplomatic considerations that go into all of those things. The processing of people to come to Dominica, or the return of Dominicans because that are overseas, who may be coming home from countries and things. So what is the status of those people? What kind of bilateral discussions that have to take place before we ensure that we have a proper resolution of the travel restrictions, which hinges on those shared security interests that we speak of? The citizenship by investment discussions surrounding the citizenship by investment program, there has always been the talk and the need to emphasize rigorous security procedures, the need to have independent due diligence, and to enhance the transparency of that program through perhaps third-party oversight. That was alluded to by Mr. Gregoire in terms of salvaging it. This must be cited as a way to address the concerns regarding our CBI programs and regarding our financial and border security. And I just want to throw that out there very generically tonight, because a lot has been said about the CBI program. We know Mr. Andre and Mr. Nassif alluded to all the issues surrounding those things, but I think at greater risk to us, okay, because we see our people are already being affected. And no doubt, when we have this lack of rigorous, independent due diligence, when we have when we don't have enhanced transparency through these programs, through third-party oversights, when we have all these international concerns regarding our financial and territorial security, it hinges on governance. It hinges on something Mr. Gregoire is speaking about, the independence of the Electoral Commission, which we will talk about later. Because anything can influence an election. Anything can influence governance. And that is why, to me, tonight, these two topics are so relevant. Because if we do not look and discuss healthily our international relations vis-a-vis our structural integrity, okay, in Dominica, in terms of everything else, that might affect our democratic process. We have to be mindful of that. Especially if now maybe there might be more than 60,000 passport holders out there. We don't know. We don't know. And so these are things we have to consider very closely. And I would like to say tonight that we have to seriously, based on what has been said earlier and what we know of, be more diligent in ensuring that Dominica complies with international security standards, that we are not a threat. We don't continue to be seen as a threat to people out there. And we also have to consider what are our diplomatic considerations, okay, which ensures that our people of Dominica, okay, are able to enjoy, right, a proper standard of bilateral relations and discussions. Dominicans should not be worse off because of that, okay? And we need to ensure that our people, in whatever actions that are taken by any government, particularly on this issue, I'm not sure if we have fully explored the security risks to Dominicans. We have always brought up the security risks to the United States and to Europe and all of those countries. But what are the security risks to Dominicans? Have we been able to consider that? What are the unlimited, or I say limitless risks that our national security and integrity in Dominica may face with, you know? And simply because no one knows not only the amount of money that has been raked in from the sale of the passport, who has those passports? What is their background? What are they capable of? Where do they come from? You know, yes, passports have been sold to build things in Dominica. How many of these people would actually consider personally invested in Dominica for the growth and development of Dominicans? And who are they? Can they? Do they have the possibilities of it? I'll raise some very serious questions. How many of them are international criminals? How many of them are supporting international terrorism? How many of them are supporting gun-running events? How many of them may have been criminals in their own country? And now that we are saying they have to come to Dominica, what are we exposing ourselves to? I want to raise that question tonight. And I'm happy that Mr. Nassif mentioned those two words, risk and salvage, because these are serious, loaded words, you know, and salvage means, you know, things are falling apart, sinking, broken, underwater, and we have to try to make sure that it comes out of the abyss of what we don't know exists out there, so that we can have a secure and productive future for our people.
All right. Thanks, Simeon, for the opening remarks there. We certainly will go down to part two in a minute. But Professor Alex Bruno, Gregor Nassif mentioned in his opening remarks there, maybe our relations with Cuba, with Venezuela, with China may be impacting the U.S. reaction, the U.S. response, you know, that they have given us in terms of the sanctions on our visa and visa restrictions. What are your thoughts on that, in addition to your opening remarks on the subject?
Okay, well, thanks. Good evening, gentlemen. It's good to be here. Gregor is correct. In fact, he took these notes from my notes when he spoke about the geopolitics, which is a bigger issue. And the main issue, I think, that drives the visa restriction. Although it has been argued that there have been some unforced errors within the program, and Gregor suggested that it happened, or he believes that the divergence of funds away from the Treasury would have started in 2017. Other people might believe before that. What I believe and know, however, is that the government has essentially lost control of the program. And please don't ask me to give you any evidence. I can if I have to. But based on my research and what I'm hearing, it would appear as if our country does not now essentially manage the program in and of itself. The program is in the domains of the special interest who actually benefit from the program. And by that, I'm not implicating Gregor or our local people who are involved in the program per se. Of course, we can speak in closed doors in terms of the nitty-gritty of the CBI funds, but I can confidently say that our program is not essentially managed by the government, and as such, herein lies the problem. The players, major players in the geopolitical sphere, well, the major player, America per se, is wary about our posture in the Americas, especially as pertains to Venezuela and certainly China, and what they see as our stubbornness in holding on to Cuba, our sister country. And as such, the administration used our soft sport to put pressure on us. And I think Andre spoke about, and I think Andre and or Simeon spoke about the quality of the people from the Third Island refugees who are going to be sent to Dominica. I heard the Secretary of State boasting that they're going to be sending the worst of the worst. Our country didn't say that we're going to get the worst of the worst. And if we get the worst of the worst, we have some problems, because I don't think we have the resources and wherewithal to manage the worst of the worst. But I think what was done in terms of the visa restriction was part sort of a trump card to get what America wants of Dominica. And I'm sorry that our Dominican citizens have to undergo this indignity of being denied American visa and being sent back. Yes, the Gregor story is a big story, but not everybody's story is as broadcast widely as Gregor's story. I know many Dominicans who cannot now visit the sick and ailing spouses and the children, and people who routinely recreate in the United States. They have money and they want to do stuff, but they can't because of the restrictions. I know people who are trying to get naturalized and regularized, who have been denied for probably staying 1 day or two beyond the time that they were supposed to stay away from the country 3 years ago. So again, going back to what Gregor said in terms of the geopolitics, I think that is something that's been used. And yes, there were enough cases of unquestionable characters holding Dominica's passport for America and any other country, the EU and the United Kingdom, as again Gregor alluded to take action against Dominica. I'm hoping that that's not the case, but until and unless we sanitize the program, which is not very easy to do, I think regime change would have to be a precursor to fixing the issue. I'm not too sure that about the viability of our program moving forward. Again, Simeon spoke to what Gregor mentioned, and I'm happy we had Gregor here because Gregor understands the issues from a front row seat in the theater. And I know him to be somebody who shoots straight. I don't think he was here trying to sugarcoat or cover up. I mean, he presented information and argument, and I'm happy that he did. As an expert in the field, as an expert hotelier as well. And we should just embrace the information and try to make good of it. But I honestly believe, gentlemen, that the best that can happen to Dominica now is a regime change. And when that happens, or maybe I should say if it happens, we will take steps and measures to salvage, if we can, many of our industries and our organizations. And certainly CBI is one of those. Should the program go away entirely? I don't think we can afford it. Going away, should we depend on it less? I believe we should. Should we have done so many years ago? I believe we should. Should we redirect its focus? I think we can make it more eco-Dominican centric and away from public major sea and sand issues, which I think, again, well, not just sea and sand, but the issues that it has been used for of late. I see the program benefiting Dominicans who want to return, not just people who want to be Dominican citizens. So the re-entry into the Dominican system, I think we should use up the program somehow to attract Dominicans with money, because there are Dominicans with money who live overseas and would want to come in if there are possibilities for them to use the assets of state to invest in our state. So in the new era of CBI, if we are blessed enough to continue the program, I think we should think of attracting re-entry into Dominica for those Dominicans who would like to do what Gregor and others would have done in our country, not just in the hotel sector, but in other fields as well. New industries, green economy, space engineering, etc., etc., etc. So let me just do a preamble in terms of a one sentence to answer the question for soundbite or news clip, to say that the government of Dominica, in my view, have essentially lost control of the program. And the best that can happen right now is for there to be regime change, government change, and a considered effort that comprises of resource people to look at the CBI seriously again and bring it in line with what is being demanded of the program. I think it's a beautiful program if managed well, but alas, the program is not being managed by our government, essentially, and herein lies the problem. So I believe, as Simeon said, and Andre as well said, we can expect the same, more of the same. And if things change, it is because America decided to flex a bit its geopolitical muscle, because probably something was received or something was gotten. But based on the mere evidence, I don't think any much have changed or could have changed. Because as I said repeatedly, maybe for the fourth time, our country's government does not have essential control of the CBI program.
Thank you, Alex. Basically, my thought is that, a substantial amount of the CBI proceeds, early o'clock, could really have gone into strengthening all the other major sectors in Dominica, like the agriculture sector, the fisheries sector, the tourism sector, the manufacturing, agro-business sector, the tech industry sector, and so on. I mean, this would have really given us a better economy than we have today. But let us move on to the part two of the discussion here tonight. And Dr. Andre, let me put the question to you. What should be done now to ensure an effective electoral commission that can produce free and fair future elections in Dominica? As we know, the independence of the Electoral Commission matters. So what latitude and discretion does the commission have that makes its independence so important? And we can take some lessons from all of the communications that we've had from Gregor Nassif to the government of Dominica with regard to that electoral commission. Your thoughts, Dr. Andre, because here's some talking points on this. Dominica's government refused to do a total re-registration of electors in Dominica's electoral reform exercise. Campaign finance reform was not included. Special provisions for voting by overseas-based Dominicans were excluded. A reconstitution of the Electoral Commission to include major stakeholders like the Bar Association, the DIC, the Dominican Employees Federation, the Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association, the clergy, the National Youth Council, etc. These suggestions were rejected. The effects of the discontinuation of the tenure of the experienced and qualified recent past elections officer, Ian Anthony, and instead an inexperienced officer was placed in that office. The Electoral Commission started the process of reconfirmation of electors in October 2025 and has made very slow progress in registering new voters, reconfirming registered electors, and issuing voter ID cards to electors to date, with the deadline of October 2026 quickly approaching. And it doesn't seem as if the Electoral Commission feel it has the discretion to move that date. So your thoughts, Dr. Andre?
The question, Mr. G, is why these deficiencies? Why this patent failure to act along the lines dictated and shown by a number of viable or functioning democracies within the region? Why has there been, for example, a suspension of confirmation? Why has the government refused or failed to take steps, perhaps to expand, just as Sir Byron recommended, mind you, to expand the commission to make it more independent? What is the justification for these pressing omissions? The answer is not blowing in the wind. The answer is clear. The government has made it known from 2008 that they have no intention of having free and fair elections in Dominica. Go look for an email by our senior counsel right here in Dominica. How can you expect to have the Electoral Commission operating in a fashion that reflects the best practices of free and fair election when two of its senior members are peddling passports for a living? How can you? And we're talking about free and fair elections. How can we even talk about free and fair elections in a country where the prime minister is talking about one party state in the interest of national unity, with who at the helm, may I ask? So the whole discussion is somewhat artificial because, again, the evidence is clear. There has not been a commitment. What we have now is a reiteration of a policy in which free and fair elections is being hanged by the neck until dead. How can we talk about meaningful change by this Electoral Commission when there are credible reports that even now acolytes or accomplices of the political directorate are in Antigua, are in Guadeloupe, or in Martinique, covertly seeking to entice Dominicans to come and vote, with one of the central targets being Roseau North, mind you. So the whole debate is pure artificial. The government, or those in power, frankly, have not dressed in their best Sunday suits, singing Gregorian chants, walking on the road to Damascus, as a reflection of the fact that they have changed their attitudes. They haven't. That imperative remains, remaining in power at all costs, even when Dominica's development is being sacrificed on the altar of greed. We have to call a spade a spade. That's exactly what's happening in Dominica. The way to achieve change, frankly, with great respect, is a complete mobilization of all those patriotic forces who want to see Dominica prosper, who want to see the businesses in Dominica do well. And I agree with the professor that there are Dominicans out there, thousands of them with deep pockets, who would more than, without any encouragement, just an enabling environment, come in, develop, build their homes, renovate their homes, purchase, do their little businesses, market, support local businesses right here in Dominica. Just with some encouragement, not special treatment, not duty-free concessions as these foreign companies are being given, not a leader boasting about the amount of money foreigners are sending out of Dominica, for God's sakes. Not looking with sadness etched on your face at the number of small businesses that are going out of business, but resuscitate and revigorate Dominica. So unless people come together on a massive Herculean confirmation drive, the political forces that have the interests of Dominica had come together, not compete with each other in certain constituencies, but having a plan to make this the final push to bring some peace and prosperity to Dominica, to get rid of the victimization, to give everyone who shows the ambition and the talents to invest and to have their businesses and to employ Dominicans. That is what Dominica needs today, to tap into its own resources, not to farm out, for example, the geothermal. What happened in 2007, 2008, when Washwood Douglas and Gabriel Christian and some others formed a company with a Dominican with a PhD in the States to harness geothermal energy? What happened? They were sidelined. a foreign company was engaged. A famous Dominican intellectual said, "Oh, what a brief, wonderful move. That company has a wonderful track record in St. Lucia. Where are they now? We are, if the reports are true, $200 million in the hole. And we have farmed out the geothermal energy to an Israeli company, for God's sakes. That will probably give us 10,000 novenas. And what is the benefit for Dominicans? Where is the promise of lower rates? Arthi warned us that for this to be viable, it has to require 3 to 5 years. But how can it be viable if you're guaranteeing a foreign company a certain guaranteed rate of income? You should ask Gregor how many such guarantees he received during his tenure as a hotelier in Dominica and other local businesses. None. So this is what we have to do. Harness those resources, and I agree with Alex, quite frankly, things will fall apart if we continue on this road where the purpose of governance is to farm away all our resources, whether they are parrots, whether there's environmentally protected land, whether it's in debauch. We need the correct governance body to repatriate all Dominica's resources and talents and people to come back to develop their own country. That's basically what we need. Nothing else in my respectful view.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. I just want to let the listeners know that we will open the lines a little bit later on, so you'll be able to call in and join the conversation, ask a few questions, and make some brief comments. But Gregor, I want to go back to you now, because you have been struggling. I mean, it seems to be it's a big struggle that you've been having with the government to make them understand your point of view on the Electoral Commission and the work that it's doing, or the fact that it's not doing the work that it was really meant to do. I mean, you have seen how it is been acting. It is forgotten about its independence. I mean, and you have been really fighting with the government on this. Give us your thoughts on this, and where do you see this whole thing heading?
Sure, Sheridan. So if we step back a bit, I think we're all quite familiar with the reform process, and I think we know that there were significant gaps from the recommendations that came from Amsterdam to what was passed in law. There were key areas in terms of residency and bribery and treating and campaign finance and the structure of the Electoral Commission and so on, that effectively were significantly watered down or were not taken into account at all. And so then we had these laws passed, and we know that the opposition boycotted the 2022 elections, and the bills went through Parliament with no opposition. So we know that we got laws that were not reflective of really what the recommendations were and what should have been. We also know that Senator Paris later tried to bring the amendments to the floor of the House to tighten some of the gaps, but that those amendments never saw the light of day, and so we have this situation, and the laws were passed. Not ideal, but I would say probably an improvement of the situation we had prior. And then we see what has happened with the implementation of these laws. We see the suspension of voter registration for a year. We see that we held local elections without people being able to register. Both of those things are not constitutional. We see that according to the law, the ID cards were to be issued once someone was approved. Since the confirmation started last October, it's been 8 months. Not a single card has been issued. So there's been a massive failure in terms of implementation of the new laws. And what for me is really shocking is that I am not aware of a single press conference that the Commission has held to acknowledge and to own the failures and to apologize and to explain their plans to improve things. Yeah. So for me, that is an incredible failure that we're being asked to live with, and the Prime Minister referred to these failures as water below the bridge, and it's time to move on, and that we just have to confirm and so on. So for me, in any situation where an institution fundamentally fails in its mandate, which is the case here, there has to be a leadership change to reassert the people's trust in the institution to carry out its work. So that is really what I have been pushing for, because we've had to swallow a law that is not ideal. There are very significant gaps there. And we have to be clear that the Commission has discretion in dealing with things like residency, with bribery, with treating, the integrity of the voter list. There are many, many things in an election process that the discretion of the Commission to ensure the integrity of the process comes into play. So for me, it is very disrespectful and disappointing that the government, that the Prime Minister specifically, does not see the obvious concerns and the obvious lack of trust. So on the one hand, I am asking everyone to register and to confirm, and I think that all the political parties, all of civil society should be pushing for that very aggressively. To talk about re-registration at this point for me makes no sense. We're way past that, and that was not all that also was not part of the recommendations in terms of how to deal with this. So we are past that, and we need to focus on persons confirming and so on. But at the same time, I believe that the leadership and the confidence issue has to be dealt with, so that we don't come out of yet another electoral process where there is significant concern about the freeness and the fairness. And so that is what I have been trying to loudly suggest. And I wish more persons would be speaking about it, because I know that many persons share this concern, and I just think it's something we need to keep on it, because we are going to go into a new election. It could be very soon, and the belief and the trust in the Commission's competence and independence is very crucial.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that, Gregor. I mean, it's good to have you here tonight, because you have really been engaging with the government on this issue, and for some reason, they're not listening, and they're not concerned about the independence of the Electoral Commission. They're not concerned about the fact that it has been making errors upon errors. And in fact, so many people tried to register over the past year or so, and they could not get to register. I mean, imagine that. And the Constitution says that should be continuation of registration. So I'm not so sure what is really going on here. But I mean, Simeon, let me come to you now for your thoughts on this, because you've been around and watching this whole Electoral Commission in operation. I mean, you know, remember Ian Anthony was there. I mean, his his thing came to an end because of his age and he had to leave. But I mean, they could have retained him to continue the process. It would have been probably a lot more efficient because he's much more experienced. And I believe this young lady who's taking charge of as chief elections officer. Your thoughts on this whole process and what is going on here?
Okay, let me perhaps say two things on this whole issue. And what I would like to look at it, first of all, the role and the independence of the Electoral Commission and democratic stability. These are the two things I want to look at. It is important to note that the effectiveness of any electoral commission is defined by its ability to operate without external influence. That's the first thing we have to look at. And one of the sad issues we have at hand is that we have an electoral commission that, to a very large extent, has not been operating without external influence. If you look at the Constitution of Dominica, in both of the chapters that cover the Electoral Commission, it says in the last clauses of both the duties of the Chief Elections Officer and the role of the Electoral Commission, that in the exercise of their duties, they must do so without external influence. And so the question we have to ask is, we have an Electoral Commission which has a responsibility to ensure that we have democratic stability through the overseeing of any elections in the country, because free and fair elections is important. And we always have to be mindful of the potential risks that can occur from not having free and fair elections. And so the role of any electoral commission, I will repeat, must be defined by its ability to operate without external influence. To what extent they will have a certain discretion and latitude, we have to understand that an independent commission, if it exists, typically should have the authority to manage voter registration, oversee the conduct of polling stations, and to certify results. Fortunately for me, I grew up in a home where my father was chief elections officer, and he was also local government commissioner. So he played a vital role in general elections as well as local government elections. So I remember going way back as a child, 10, 11, 12-year-old. I was 12 years at the time in 1975, in early 1975, when we had the voter, the new electoral law, and where the 18-year-olds were allowed to vote for the first time, and going all around Dominica with my father. Because as a young boy, I had to follow my father wherever he went, both in terms of his work on a weekend and I remember many Sunday afternoons between January and March of 1975, I would follow him around, and I appreciated the process of free and fair elections, okay, and be there, okay. The independence of the Electoral Commission is vital because it serves as a neutral arbiter of the democratic process, ensuring that the will of the voter is accurately effected. Who are those voters? And so the role of the Electoral Commission has to be to enhance integrity. And I'm happy that Mr. Gregoire and Mr. Nassif and other people have been calling for that. And that has been the cry of many people, Johnson Boston, and the integrity, a lot of committees in Dominica, okay? Of course, my only disappointment is the fact that I find the churches have been relatively silent on the issue. The Evangelical Association, the Dominica Christian Council, which I think has a voice in ensuring that we have integrity in elections in Dominica and to ensure that it is free and fair. And so we have seen proposals to ensure free and fair elections. And what have they been involved? The modernization of the voter lists. We talk about, I think, biometric identification, and where the commission has to be provided with the fiscal and the administrative autonomy to help them prevent political interference in the electoral management process. And that is where I think the government of the day has abused its authority by knowing that because they are responsible for whatever fiscal support that has to be given or administrative support, they have sort of pulled the rug under the Electoral Commission and use the authority as a batter to interfere in the electoral management of Dominica. I am not one who supports any idea of any Dominican coming to Dominica to vote. And I've heard people say we have to modernize things for people to vote. I say a clear and unequivocal no. Because there is a principle to elections. If we understand what election does for democracy, elections are not only about voting. Elections are not only about putting an X. Elections are not only about coming and make sure people put an X and put. No, that's not what our elections are about. Elections, by and large, are to ensure that through a meaningful electoral response, there is freedom and there's fairness. Because without both of those, our voters have no voice and little control over the direction of their country. That's important. Free and fair elections are to ensure that the people who reside in a country can influence, and that is the only time. When you look at our system of the Westminster system of governance, I think Dr. Andre and Alex, these people are better able to relate that to me. But our system of governance, which says power is actually in the hands of the people ultimately during election time. Who are these people? The people who reside on the island. And I think it is grossly unethical that anyone who resides anywhere else should come into a country and dictate to anyone living in a country and undermine their power to determine what happens to them. Because free and fair elections allow people living in a country representative democracy to determine the political makeup and future policy direction of their country. Who's going to suffer or benefit from any policy direction that an elected government puts in place? It's the people living within the boundaries of the territory of a country. Yes, we may say there are people living overseas and they influence. I've heard some waterlogged arguments that Dominicans send home barrels and they send money home. But hey, the reverse is also true, you know. I don't think many of us have ever stopped to consider. Just think about it. The amount of Dominicans who send packages overseas. The amount of parents of Dominicans who send hundreds of thousands of dollars to their children overseas to invest in their education in universities. I'm not sure if we are mindful and aware of all the Dominicans who regularly would send local products to people overseas. Does that mean, therefore, that because Dominicans are sending packages overseas, that they have a right to vote in the Canadian, the British, the American, or any other elections in any other country because they send a package overseas? Yes, they say Dominicans send remittances overseas, but I'm sure the quantum of funds that people in Dominica send overseas to support families. So does that mean, therefore, that because of that, we can go and vote in the United States election or in the Canadian election? My argument may seem futile. But if we're talking about people sending barrels and people sending money, that gives them the right to vote in Dominica. The reverse is also true because Dominicans do send barrels and not necessarily barrels, but packages and money overseas. And I think it is unfair for anyone to postulate the position that people living overseas should come into or we should make any accommodation because they don't pay taxes in the country. They are not deprived of the benefits of the state when they are not overseas. Okay? They are not the ones who have to undergo the fiscal restraints and adjustments that people living in a country have to face. And so it's not just putting an X in a paper and go back and say, because you have a Dominican passport, you can come back to vote. I think we have to rethink those very clearly. Because right now, when you look at it, the economic situations that Dominicans are going through, are they being felt by people overseas? Okay. The lack of proper governance that we are encountering here, maybe in the United States alone, because we have what you call a watershed of a mimic of proper governance in the United States now. But the lack of proper governance in Dominica, does that mean that that the people overseas are undergoing it? The improper health care that we are going through, the substandard health care that we have in Dominica, that every minister of government decides when their toenail is hurting them, they can take a plane and go overseas, whereas Dominicans have to go to the hospital in goodwill and suffer for lack of proper medication and lack of proper medical care and lack of medical convenience. Okay? So we are the ones living in the country to do that. So I think in closing, we need to understand that there's a relationship between free and fair elections and democratic stability. And so we would have to understand the importance of free and fair elections, how transparent it is, how inclusive the process is, how socially stable it is, and what is the level of the perception of international standing in our election process. Because elections must be perceived as fair, that whoever governs has a clear mandate, not only to rule, but to bolster public confidence. That is why it's important. People have to feel confident in their future, in their livelihood. Parents must feel confident in the future of their children. The marginalized must feel confident that there's a place for them in a society. The farmers must feel confident. And so that's what elections are about. So when we talk about free and fair elections, we're talking about, are we giving the people of Dominica the opportunity to provide a clear mandate for governance that bolsters their confidence as a citizen so they can feel happy and free? And so we must be mindful of the potential risks involved when we talk about free and fair elections, because the challenges to electoral integrity can lead to domestic tension and can complicate relations locally and internationally. And so we have to ensure that we adhere to standards for free and fair elections to ensure that Dominica remains stable, that we have an environment that is conducive to proper investment, and that we become once again a respected member of the global community. When we look at the two things that we are discussing tonight, okay, the CBI program and free and fair elections, I think more and more, Dominica, which was once on the pedestal of governance, good governance, and free and fair elections, that has been more or less, I would say, decimated. And we need to return to a position where we are respected members of the region and the global community. Because I travel, and when I travel many places, there are many people who, particularly in the Caribbean, who are listening to what is happening in other Caribbean countries. And often I am very taken aback at the perception of some of my fellow Caribbean colleagues of Dominica and the people of Dominica. When we look now at this election that is coming up in goodwill, okay? And we have to look at that, okay? And we begin to see what is creeping in. It leads to many things which would further undermine the respect that people have for us as a global community. Because politics in Dominica has become one whereby, maybe I should speak about that later, but the bedrock for politics now has become transactional and popularity. So who can throw the money in and who is more popular? And I'll end there for now.
Yeah, Simeon, yeah, we will discuss that in a little bit more depth in the part 3, which is coming up of the discussion here tonight. But I want to go to Professor Alex Bruno, and then we'll ask Lambi to take some calls and quickly take a few calls, and then before we go into the third part of the discussion tonight, which I think is the most substantial part in terms of the way forward for Dominica. So, Alex Bruno, your thoughts on the whole business of the Electoral Commission and free and fair elections and whatnot?
Well, to the extent that one party controls the play in the system, we have not had free and fair elections in Dominica for the better part of a quarter century. Have we had free elections? Yes. Have we had a semblance of fair elections? Yes. I mean, the OAS et al. Have told us that while elections were free, they were not necessarily fair. And we can argue this every day if we like. We could bring semantics and talk about strategy, and at the end of the day, the people see, the people feel. That's why there is a great level of despondency among the electorates on the island right now. And I suspect that the same party, which is very well known for importing votes to assist its election winning possibilities, may very well win an election with the local votes, if they're able to excite those who vote for them and suppress the vote of the opposition. And the opposition too has to take some blame for the lackluster approach of voters and electors, the constant infighting, the seeming division, the lack of strategic positioning, even right now in the election in Goodwill. Well, not just Goodwill, Simeon Rosenhoff, which includes a number of different communities. I'm seeing things are happening. I'm happy that I'm seeing opposition presence, but I'm hearing and seeing things too that the incumbent is doing in terms of the wholesale importation of the votes from Guada. I'm sure that they're taking quite some votes from Guadeloupe to take into Dominica. I know a few relatives who have reported to me that they have been approached. And that's a problem. Simeon spoke to that.
And Antigua as well.
Antigua, yeah. Simeon spoke to that. Voting is a residency thing. It's not necessarily a citizenship remit. So you may be a citizen but still be disqualified to vote if you don't reside. That has been a vexing topic, so I'm not going to take a position as to whether Dominicans overseas should vote. All I'm saying is that if the voting process for Dominicans overseas is unfair and it is in the favor of one side, it cannot be right that one side can wholesale import votes to the detriment of the other side and probably free and fair elections in the country as a consequence. So probably in this environment, we need to create a matrix where all Dominicans who live overseas, if they would like to vote, and they meet a particular requirement, whatever it is they want to be the requirement, Simeon, it could be paying into Dominica's tax-based or investment on the anything that ties them to Dominica in a substantial economic, social, political, cultural way, and they are reaffirmed and qualified, they could probably do an absentee vote as America does. That is the modern way of doing things. But to just transport people in, as was the case in the 16th, 17th, and maybe parts of 18th century, does not seem right. It's not dignified. Especially when you're using those people as pawns for your party, not for development of the country. So I'm not necessarily against Dominicans voting everywhere, but I think it should be fair. The matrix should support everyone. If Ivo lives in Yugoslavia and Ivo wants to vote, Ivo should be able to vote if Ivo meets the requirement. If Simeon is in Belgium and Simeon wants to vote, Simeon should be able to vote if Simeon reaches the requirements. But the way it has been done, it has been alarmingly unfair, disheartening, and vexing. Again, I'm not going to go on record and say that Dominicans should not vote. What I'm saying is that the system should help the development of our country and should benefit all interests. And I go back to my default position, gentlemen. and say the only time and way that the Electoral Commission finds its way and gets its strength is when the regime change. The present Dominican government has very little incentive to do things right, and the Prime Minister et al. Know that they're not doing right by the people. Mr. Nassif could write until the end of day. They are not going to pay attention because what he say is making sense, and it is leading to them doing the right thing that will take them out of office. By doing the right thing. If only this current regime, after a quarter century, did or does what is right in terms by the reform, chances are they'll be out of office. Now, I'm not saying that reform is organized to get them out of office, but fair and free elections will certainly, I think, result in a different kind of government in Dominica. At the end of the day, Dominicans have had this party in power for 25 years. C'est pas nous qui plus sort à la terre. We are not growing, we're not basking in glory. Things are getting worse. Dominicans want change. But the status quo, the powers that be, is fighting. So, Mr. Nassif, I'm with you. I see what you're doing. I think history will make you very favorable. But until and unless we can find a way, Simeon, to let the vote be the referendum on the way forward on that reform. And that only the reform alone can be an issue to take the government down. And Mr. Nassif has given us enough ammunition that we can strategize, package, and sell against the present regime. Dominicans just have to come out to vote, reconfirm or confirm or register and vote. A new idea, and then we will fix the system. So if we can sell that to the people well as an election strategy, that is something else. The passport too, in and of itself, is a strategy that can throw the government down. But we talk about it and we came off it. We have to stay with it and drive it home as our good friend, the former president of Dominica, Charles Savrin, taught us. You agitate on the same issue as Mr. Nassif is doing now. We should join him and agitate until the government can take no more. But we're just jumping, hopping, babying, making noise, dividing, doing strategy publicly, infighting. I mean, what are we really doing? So my call again, my default position, gentlemen, is all of what we are saying, they make a lot of sense. But until and unless we can find a way to take these guys out of office, very precious little, to borrow a phrase from my dear friend Dr. Andre, will change. And now is the time that we have to do it. That divisive lack of strategic approach to try to dethrone a party that is so very well entrenched after 25 years of political incumbency is a laughing matter. And I'm hearing people saying that the opposition is going to win in goodwill, Rosanoff. Well, I'm measuring, and I'm going to tell you what I think eventually, probably not publicly, but I'll share with my good friends who assist my work as to where we are on that. I am not fully convinced as yet that the opposition has a runaway chance to win Rosanoff until and unless I see it. But so far, I think the evidence will be presented sometime later on. Not publicly, maybe, but we need to measure. You cannot go into politics or election and not knowing what you're going into. You have to know what people are saying. Walking around and getting energy and buying a drink and laughing and talking is not science. You need the science. Have we done the work in Roseau? I'm not too sure. In Rosanoff, I'm not too sure. Well, I'm doing the work. And I will again share with my friends and see where we are. Hopefully somebody listens and we do what is right. Because we can win Rosanoff, but we have to win Rosanoff for us to win Rosanoff. That's my take on that.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Let me just go over to Lambi. Let Lambi give out the numbers so that we can take a few calls before we go into part 3 of the discussion. And part 3 of the discussion is we are on the edge of a precipice. Why the next general election really matters. Lambi, you'll give out the numbers. Let's take some calls.
Is his mic muted?
We're not hearing you, Lambi.
Global VMQ. Taking your calls at the moment, the numbers are as follows: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Those are local numbers. The overseas or international number is as follows: 305 432 9624. Let me run those again one more time. 449-3095-9697, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. We have a caller there ready. Caller, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, Lambie. Good evening to the panel.
Good evening.
Gentlemen, good evening to you all. And thank you for putting your time into this electoral reform, especially Mr. Gregoire, who is sticking his neck out. I will not say any more than that. He's definitely sticking his neck out. So I appreciate that, for free and fair elections. Gentlemen, some time ago I was listening on a Monday night to the pastor, the good pastor, Pastor Rodney. And the topic went to politics. It went to the reconfirmation process. And Pastor Rodney said, I have the document in my hand. Roosevelt Skerrit is the first person to be confirmed in Roseau Central. When I heard that, I immediately got on the phone and I called him. I said, wait a minute, Pastor. You're telling me that Roosevelt Skerrit just got confirmed in Roseau Central? You mean he's not registered in JCAS? Or maybe he's registered at the financial center? Or maybe he's registered at Dons and Divas? Or maybe he's registered at the Building of Dark Secrets? I was wondering where he's registered, because they had him on some kind of a document that he was the first voter to be reconfirmed in Roseau Central. You heard me? Roseau Central. I'm saying to myself, but this is a laughing matter. We make laws in Dominica, but we don't seem to have consequences for breaking the law. That in a very, reasonable time frame and a clear-cut way to get that consequence. If someone breaks the law, a citizen should be able to take that person to court within a reasonable time and get some result. But we don't seem to have that. If anybody knows about what is the consequence of breaking any of these electoral laws, like unduly influencing the Electoral Commission, for example, is there some way to take them to court? And I mean, how is it a joke? Because you have the Prime Minister's name as being registered in Roseau Central. That really got me, because I'm saying, if I could afford it, I would get a lawyer and start to talk. Let's go to court on this, because it really got me. Roosevelt Skerrit is the representative in JCAS. He should be registered in JCAS. That's where we know he has his residence. Even as the Prime Minister, he's living in Mont Daniel. His wife has a business in Roseau. But how can he be registered in Roseau Central? How do you feel about that, gentlemen? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question, Lambie. If you don't have any question right now, we'll just go ahead. Dr. Andre, maybe you might want to tackle the answer to that question as you proceed to the part 3 of the discussion here tonight. I mean, the discussion is what we are at the edge of a precipice. Why the next general election really matters, and some talking points on this would be: Dominica is at the edge of a precipice. Why the next general election really matters. Why we must all vote. Is this confirmation process nothing more than casting aside eligible voters? Why are voters still being recruited from abroad to vote? Why are voters being bribed by gifts of money, by fake titles to houses and still promises to vote? Why are persons being recruited to vote in the Roseau constituencies? Why are some persons being wooed and troubled into subscribing to a one-party system in Dominica? Why has the old voters list not been cleansed? Why is Dominica still being politically crucified? A by-election is imminently due in Roseau North, and there is intense speculation that there will likely be a general election in Dominica by December of 2026. Is the opposition organized to contest the upcoming Roseau North constituency by-election? Is the opposition organized to contest a snap general election by November 2026? So, Dr. Andrew, maybe you could give us some your thoughts on this, but you want to take
Lambie is on the
let's
line.
take a call, Lambie.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A couple of things. Hi, there are a couple of things going on here. And I'm surprised, well, not surprised, but I'm disappointed that this electoral reform thing has been going on for so many years. But I'm not surprised because it began wrong. If it began wrong, it's going to end wrong. But the following Dominica, and I've said before, and people disagree, is this gross constitutional illiteracy that we have. The fact of the matter is that we talk about free and fair elections, but the Constitution does not call for free and fair elections. Nobody knows why we need free and fair elections constitutionally, because we have not taken the time to understand it. The Prime Minister of Dominica believes what everybody else believes, that he has the authority to call elections. That is nowhere in the Constitution. The Constitution does not say that. But there are people, everybody believes it. I remember sitting in the Prime Minister's office and telling him to his face that the only authority to run elections in Dominica is the Electoral Commission. No matter how much, he may be the best man to understand elections, he's not. And the question that was asked to me was, well, how will the Prime Minister get what he wants? But if everybody else tells the Prime Minister that he's correct to say that elections can be called at any time, when that is not what the Constitution says, then you can't blame him for what's going on. You have to blame everybody else. And that's where we are. We have this situation in which people claim to love the Constitution, but they don't take time to understand its Constitution. Now, the caller who called before me made a statement about the Prime Minister being registered in Roseau South, and I understood that the reason why that happened is because when he was living at the State House, he got registered in Roseau South. And in Dominica, you will have a lot of situations in which you can live in one place and vote somewhere else. Because I had a situation when I got reconfirmed. I didn't want to get reconfirmed, but then I got moved to do so. I went to the commission office to get confirmed, told them where I live. I told them I don't live where I'm registered, and I was registered to vote where I do not live. So they were breaking the law knowingly in my presence. But everybody says, okay, that's the situation that we're in. I mean, I'm so confused about what we're doing that I don't even know what to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Simeon, could you turn your mic off? Could you mute your mic, please, Simeon? Dr. Andre, I was coming over to you to talk about this part 3, but if you like, you could tackle these 2 questions that have been posed by the callers. Dr. Andre?
Well, look, there's legislation. Now, I don't know if they were amended as of last March 19th, 2025, but there was legislation which indicates that the eligibility vote in a constituency, there is a residency component within that constituency. I think the legislation is quite clear. The legislation cannot be said to be contrary to the Constitution, particularly if the Constitution doesn't address that issue, quite frankly. So I don't necessarily see that as a problem, to be quite frank with you. The problem is whether the political directorate is prepared to adhere to best practices as manifested in virtually every democratic country to hold free and fair elections. This is not rocket science. The principles are quite clear. That's why people talk about each person, each vote. That's why there's a debate as to whether, in fact, Dominicans residing in the diaspora, who are not there to take the blows when they elect a government, how fair is it that they should be allowed to participate with impunity? Canada has decided that issue, but Canada has allowed Canadians abroad to participate because the Supreme Court was quite clear. The number of Canadians who participate is so minuscule that it will not affect the outcome of the vote in any particular constituency. But that is not what obtains in Dominica, because a critical component of the diasporic participation in voting in Dominica is that voters are being transported to particular constituencies, diluting the local vote. making elections meaningless. I heard somebody talk about Skerity's registered in Roseau North. He lives in Vacaz, and voters are being parachuted to vote in particular constituencies to ensure the triumph of a particular candidate. And that is what is so insidious about that aspect of voting. It cannot be justified in any way, in any shape, in any form. And Mr. G, you raised a whole set of questions regarding Dominica being at the edge of a precipice. The questions you raise indicate that Dominica is in fact in a precipice because it has rendered meaningless the whole process of voting, which is so integral to a democratic society as we know it, quite frankly. It has rendered it virtually meaningless because if it could be manipulated to an extent where those practices continue, where they persist, then it is academic as to who will triumph in those elections. This is why the by-election in Roseau North is so important. The question is, will the political directorate allow those free and fair practices insofar as voting to take their course, to manifest themselves, to give people to respect the power in their vote, people who live in that constituency? This is the question. And again, let me repeat it. If past is prologue, if what has happened in the past is any indication of what will happen in the future, then quite frankly, our work as a democratic society is cut out for us. We have to throw all our efforts in ensuring that that is indeed not the case, where you can win votes by distributing Kentucky Fried Chicken. Don't have nothing against Kentucky Fried Chicken, to be quite frank with you. It's very good for the digestion, but that is not the point. The point is, if this is the extent to which you ensure victory by delivering trinkets, and you do so to betray folks in the deepest consequence, where it hurts them the most, by giving them substandard medical care, by giving them substandard amenities, by depriving them of independence, by taking away their opportunities, by starving Dominica's businesses, if that is the cost of giving them Kentucky Fried Chicken, then we're in a very poor way indeed. So Dominicans have to find their inner voice. They have to find their inner strength. They have to act in their own best interest, just as the St. Vincentians did. Remember what Sakinoy Gonzalez in the last hour? You've been there for 25, 30 years. You're approaching 80. You're kissing 80 on the cheek. But you still want to cling tenaciously to power. For what purpose? You've reduced yourself to a position where you are begging people to vote for you, where you should be played in the role of the elder statesman. Is that democracy? Where you're talking about your son Dimitri taking over in God knows 2050? Huh? Is that when your own people, businesses are being closed? Is that what it is all about? When produce is not being exported? Go and ask Danny. Isn't Danny the candidate for the UWP? What happened to that indigenous enterprise they established to export Dominican produce to the surrounding islands? The electoral directorate told farmers, do not support these guys. Go and ask Danny about that initiative where he got help from the Australians to develop the Lindo Park. What was the official reaction to that initiative? How can you have a government that is conspiring to keep Dominica in a state of perpetual poverty? And you talk about democracy, and they talk about free and fair elections? That is the very negation and the repudiation of free and fair elections. Dominicans have to rescue themselves. Not for me. I don't mind. I'm not too bad, you know. I can buy my pretzel and so on and enjoy that for lunch. No problem. But Dominica has to act in their best interests if there has to be any change in the body politic of Dominica. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. Now, Gregor, the same topic we're on, part 3 of the conversation here tonight, is Dominica is at the edge of a precipice. Why the next general election matters and why we must all vote. and why we really need to have free and fair elections. Your thoughts on this, Gregor?
Okay, thanks. Don't really know where to start, but I'm an optimist. I believe in the intelligence and the common sense of the Dominica population, but I'm also a realist where we have to be honest with ourselves about how dysfunctional the opposition has been over the last many years, and the lack of credibility that has existed. And I think we also need to realize that Dominicans need a viable option and a viable way forward. And I'm just saying that to say that the opposition has a lot of work to be done on the ground. And I concur with Alex that I would not make assumptions about which way Roseau North will go. I think that it's a very clear and aggressive strategy is needed, and a lot of hard work is needed. It will be running on the old bloated voters list. At the same time, registrations are open, so there has to be a very strong registration drive for new voters for Roseau North. I think that's very key. And I'm also a realist in that I think a country gets the government that it chooses, and unless we get a change in interest and focus, and we are able to combat the apathy that exists in the country and the sense of hopelessness, I'm not sure that there will be any significant change anytime soon. So I hope for a more balanced representation in Parliament. I hope for an opposition that gives a more credible choice and a vision to the country. I hope for people that take more interest in the future. And I hope for a commission that is independent and able to run an election that the population feels, that they can be trusted. And I started by saying that I am an optimist because I do believe that the country has enormous potential. I do believe that the majority of Dominicans would like to see us on a different path, but we cannot underestimate the work involved to achieve that change. And whether we're on the edge of a precipice or not, all I can say is that the longer we wait for change, the harder change becomes to achieve, and we cannot underestimate the work ahead. Yep.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for that, Gregor. Looked like Simeon had a technical problem and he dropped off a minute, so I hope that we can get him back on. I hope that Lambie or Sherwin can readmit him into the conversation. And so Alex, let's okay, yes, I see Simeon is back on now. But Lambie, you want to take a call before we go on?
Morning.
Hello.
I'm on here.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I want to say greetings to all of you. And there's a question I have been asking myself. I would like to know if any one of you can give me a response towards that question, which has been troubling me for such a long time. We understood that the geothermal plant that has been completed is going to be managed by the people who install it and bring the equipment for 35 years. And in between the geothermal, there is another company which is going to purchase the current from the geothermal and sell it to Dominic. I am not too sure if that I understood from what people have been saying on the radio stations. So, how on earth can the government take such a decision, and the public is not aware of what type of contract. For example, when this geothermal plant has been run for 25 years, the alternators and many of the different parts of that mechanism is going to be obsolete, it's going to be old. What protection does the government or Dominica has to deal with that? When these guys are going to deliver you the plant after 25 years? After 25 years, all of this piece of equipment is almost obsolete. So I am asking myself, Dominica is in need of 20 mega to enable the whole of the island to be satisfied. What is going to happen there? What I have noticed, we have the hydro, which does not really function all the time based on the season. If there is not too much water, it is slow, so it cannot generate the amount of electricity we need. So diesel has to be consumed for that. But when 20 mega we are in need of for everything to be running smooth in terms of electricity in Dominica, but the geothermal plant is only 10 mega. So we have 15 mega of diesel to consume still. How on earth is current going to be cheaper when these American Israelites who have been responsible of the geothermal plant for 25 years, selling it to another organization and then selling it to Dominic? So I want to know, and this, I think the government does not speak to people. It does things as though it's a private enterprise. And these are the things people have been talking so much. We have observers coming during election. These people have been doing all what they want. He paid almost $500,000 to some people to advise him to do the reform. What he did from it, extracted what he wanted and just chuck it on people. While a member of the opposition UWP, these UWP supporters are on your side protesting against that. And Mr. Paris is voting in favor of that. Something is wrong, and I believe we have to pray for Mr. Thompson Fountain because he has it hard. I can feel it. He doesn't have the financial resources like this government. And, Dominican have been coming dependent because this new administration, this Labour Party or the Scary Party has turned over morals into make bad become good. And this is going to have a negative impact on our future generations. And I believe everybody we really want to see a change should collaborate with Mr. Fountain and to enable him to have that we don't lose him because of stress. So what is happening within all of this conflict that took place recently? Lane Knox and his brother has a job on this thing in Marigot. So all of these things are formed to destabilize the opposition party. I don't know what. I've been listening to your program for so many years since you started, and all of you guys are extremely intelligent and educated people. You have been trying your utmost, but yet still the financial resources these people have at their disposition is enabling them to probably win all the time by giving pull-ups. How can we do? What should we do? I want to know something, but I'm living overseas. And I'm telling you, I want to come back to my country. I want to die in my community. I want to live there. But when you are victimized, the victimization is supposed to be treason. How on earth somebody deserves some assistance from the state, and you have to go to your parliament, and because of your political affiliation, you are refused it when you are entitled to get this assistance, whatever assistance it may be? These people, I don't know what is happening to us. Something is not right. Excuse me for taking such a long time on your show this evening. I hope what I'm saying is making sense. I'm not even too sure if what I'm saying that is a lie. I am lying to myself. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're not lying to yourself at all. You're making a lot of sense. But Dr. Andre, quickly, if you're going to address this, I mean, the geothermal project it's taken a few years now, frankly, to get off the ground. I mean, there was initially some work done in the Soufrière area. We hear nothing about that. And I understand that some 200 million has been invested in this already. And now the Israeli company is going to be managing it for 25 years. I'm just wondering if they're going to write off these $200 million already spent on this thing in order to arrive at the unit cost of electricity at which the Israeli company going to sell to Domlec. And how is that, in fact, going to result in low electricity costs for Dominicans?
Bear in mind one thing. The conditions of that contract with that Israeli company have not been disclosed publicly. But again, if we look at what has transpired in the past, if we look at deals made by this government with foreign companies, many of these companies, take American Airlines, for example, for God's sakes, the contract for them to fly to Dominica on a regular basis, were they not guaranteed a certain type of return? Ask yourself one question. Do you think, shouldn't common sense tell you that that Israeli company was guaranteed a percentage of profits for their involvement in our geothermal energy? And to the extent that that is true, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that it is, because that is the pattern we've seen, then how and in what in heaven's name can you maintain? I heard what Sam Raphael talk about 18% reduction, pure foolishness. Self-serving foolishness. I'll say it openly. Because if those conditions are correct, then we will not see a return. Arthur Mate has a more legitimate voice on these issues than persons who are benefiting from the program, persons who are part of the directorship of Domlec. There will be no reduction in energy costs, I can tell you. And in 1 year, call back people like Gregor and some other hoteliers and ask them about the significant costs or reduction in costs in electricity that they have experienced. I promise you that their answer will be no surprise to you. But this is the problem. All credible engineers and contractors tell you that the cost, for example, of building these homes exceed what Dominican contractors would charge. Why is that the case? Is somebody's hands being filled under the table? Why is that the case? And if that is the case, how can you justify giving those contracts to foreign companies? You tell me, because it's on Dominica's backs that this financial outpouring for these kind of substandard housings, for example, it's Dominicans who will pay a cost, whether it's in terms of inadequate sewage provisions or inadequate construction, for God's sakes, and whether they are living in a borrowed house, like borrowed clothes that you have to give back at the end of a certain period. I know, Mr. G, you speak to the dead. You can go and ask Bonds to be what happened to the house he was living, or go and ask his brother. His brother went on radio and said within 2 or 3 hours of his death, the keys to the house were taken away from him. And he's not the only one. So how can you talk about empowering people when you're not giving them the basic ability to earn? What about the Riverside apartments built by the nuns 50 years ago? They're still standing proudly. What about Bath Estate? Is it Bath Estate? Yes, built by Patrick John and Company. These people have added to their homes. They've passed it on to their children. They've ensured generational wealth. That is the fundamental difference between what we have, what obtains as governance today, and what obtained before as good governance. You empower people. You make them earn it. Because as the old saying goes, and that's my last word on this subject, you enjoy much more when you can feel the sweat of your brow than when you sit down and you tell people, beat me so I can get another house. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. Gregor, before I go to Simeon,
Sure.
I thought maybe I might want to get a risk because you're a big consumer of electricity. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted
Yes.
to respond to a few things. I think I have a different point of view on the geothermal project. I really can't speak about the sunk cost, which I know are very significant. But what I can say is that the project was financed in the latter phases by the World Bank, and the World Bank is extremely strict. So if you ask me, one of the reasons that I am confident in the geothermal project in terms of its ability to function is that it was not financed by CBI. If it was financed by CBI, I would be very, very concerned. But it is World Bank finance, which means they're very strict in terms of the planning approvals, the environmental impact, and so on. Also, I have no problem with a foreign entity having a concession for 25 years because a plant like this and the expertise and the experience that we need. And again, because it was World Bank finance, I am confident that the rates at which DOMLEC has agreed to purchase from the geothermal foreign entity are reasonable market rates. So I think it would be crazy for Dominica not to harness the resource that we have in abundance. So, and I'm also very, very favorable just from a sustainability and a climate impact perspective that we have chosen this route. My understanding is that the plant is going to generate about 60% of our needs, hydro on average 20%. So we will continue to depend on diesel for about 1/5 of our needs until the plant can be expanded. Where I'm extremely disappointed is on the rates. I remember the Prime Minister discussing in Parliament that they have done comparative studies and that the expectation was set for savings in the order of 30% to 50%. We recently had consultations with the IRC, and when you look at the average, you have to be careful with fuel surcharge, because if you look at the proposed rates now, with the current fuel surcharge and the price of oil, which has obviously spiked because of the war, the savings, I think, probably look reasonable at 10% to 15%. Still way off of the expectation of 30 to 50%. But when you look at the average fuel charge for 2025, the savings are completely marginal, maybe 4%, maybe 3%. So I think the citizens of the country and the businesses of the country expected a lot more and deserve improved rates. For me, it's a tremendous disappointment from a rate perspective. And if the price being purchased at from the foreign entity is a reasonable market price, which I think it is, then why is the cost to the consumer so expensive? And I think what we have to look at is the DOMLEC overlay on those costs, because DOMLEC is purchasing at X, and because of their overhead costs and their operating costs, they're selling it to us at Y. And I have said publicly that I believe that an independent external audit of DOMLEC's cost structure and DOMLEC's operation is necessary to satisfy the population that the rate we are buying at is the best rate we can possibly achieve. And unless a forensic audit is done of the operations of DOMLEC, then I don't know how we can be sure of that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gregor. Dr. Andre, you wanted to make a further comment. Your mic is muted. You need to unmute.
Just one point. I certainly don't take solace in what Gregor says that because the money was funded by the World Health Organization, that somehow that is... Sorry?
By the World Bank.
The World Bank,
not World Health.
That is indicative of the fact that the money is being well spent. I wish I could say the same thing. I don't buy it. Secondly, I may be wrong, but didn't the French government withdraw its support of this program because it had serious concerns about the viability of the program and the cost? So I don't share Gregor's optimism. Obviously, he's entitled to it. And in terms of government adhering to donations or funding received from foreign organizations for the benefit of Dominica, go ask a fellow called Blessing what happened to his 6,000 which he invested with the government so that he can get access to funding for his own business. Did the government ever come through with that funding, although it received that funding? So I don't share Gregor's optimism that somehow the geothermal will be well operated and so on. And lastly, if you're giving a foreign entity a concession for 25 years, in my view, it's axiomatic that you have to give them some guarantees that it is worth their investment. It's a matter of common sense. So that is why I don't necessarily share that optimism that somehow geothermal will come to the rescue of Dominicans. Wait and see. Thank you.
Yes, Gregor, do you want to add any further comments to that?
No, I mean, in terms of the guaranteed profitability of the foreign entity, I mean, obviously they've done their financial calculations, and the rate that they've reached an agreement at which they can sell to Dominic at, they have calculated that they are going to be able to operate profitably at that rate. So they have taken their own risk assessment that at this rate we will be able to make a profit. And a concession for 25 years for an operation like this, I think, is quite normal. When I hear of the cable car company getting a 999-year lease, which I'm not sure if anyone here has heard, but I am.
Sorry, you said 999? Is that what you just said?
Yes, that is correct. I'm reliably informed that the contract with ABL and the government is a 999-year contract. So a 25-year concession for a plant and operation as complex as this, I don't think is that unusual. So that's all.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gregor, for that. Now, Simeon, let me just go back to you very quickly. I mean, because we on the final part of this discussion here tonight is Dominica is at the edge of a precipice. Why the next general election really matters, and I laid out a few talking points there. Your thoughts on this? Simeon.
Thank you, Mr. Gregor. Yeah, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you very clearly.
Yeah, are you hearing me? Okay.
Yes.
Well, to answer your question directly, whether Dominica is at the edge of a precipice, I mean, that's a matter for intense political debate. Mr. Andre said earlier on, we're in a precipice. I think we're at the bottom of a precipice. And there is no doubt that Dominica sits on, economically, Dominica is fragile. The citizenship by investment programs still remain controversial. We have a delayed electoral reform. All of these leaves Dominica in a dangerous position. And meanwhile, we have a government that is emphasizing ongoing developments such as the international airport, which even this week seems to be hanging on precarious possibilities. And so coming to the next general election, I mean, the question we have to ask is, remember that in 2022, the prime minister called a snap election. And because, of course, obviously he had to strengthen his hand, the next election will be a pivotal decision for Dominica. So given the fact, and there's no doubt when we read the reports of the International Monetary Fund, we see that Dominica is now operating on narrow economic base levels. I think our debt distress now is very vulnerable. How the government manages revenue, particularly in light of the Citizenship by Investment program, is all but in question. And so to answer the question as to whether or not we are on the edge of a precipice, having looked at all those things, I think we are what do you call it now, living now in precipitous times. And I can only say, somebody said it very eloquently earlier, that we need a regime change. I think I have to put it in ordinary language. No offense to anyone. I think it is time for the government to go. Okay? Because where we are now, economically, socially, politically, I think I've said it on this program before. I mean, it's struck. I'm surprised Dr. Andre did not know that before. And it was highlighted tonight. We're giving a foreign company a 999-year lease to operate an entity in Dominica. We were just discussing the geothermal issue. And we know that we've been lied to. We know that we've been misled because about funding and all of those kind. If you have listened to the past budget debates and you listen to the former press conferences, what we are hearing now is not what we were told before. So people have been lied to. And the question is, can Dominica continue to be governed by a government that has brought it precipitously to the bottom of a precipice? And that's a question we have to answer. And we have to be bold enough to be able to accept that unless we have, and to use the polite term now, regime change in Dominica, I don't think we can expect to see the dawn of a brighter Dominica. It's as simple as that. We have a political party that has changed more colors than Joseph Technicolor Greencoat every election. They put new faces, they put new names, they turn over different things, they come with old promises and that are never been fulfilled. Every election, there's a promise of things are going to be better. And even in the Roseau North constituency by election now, they're talking about things that new thing. What can you do after 26 years that you haven't done before, that you promised to do that you have never done? How much changing of faces and names is going to make the lives of the people of Dominica any better? You know, and so it's up to them, and that's why the topic tonight is so important. You cannot separate electoral reform and election from democracy and effective governance. And when you put that equation together, we will have to realize that we need, as Dominicans, as a force, to make a political example. I'm going to make a very strong statement. We need, as a people of Dominica, all those who are disenchanted, all those who are disappointed, all those who feel that they have been lied to. I can depart from Gregor and say, yes, I am very optimistic about Dominica. You know, I still believe that the human resource and the natural resource of Dominica has not been properly utilized for the benefit of Dominicans, because Dominicans should be much further than it is now. And so I think for Dominica to climb out of where it is now, we are in an abyss. Because if you speak to the average common man on the street, if you speak to the average young person, you speak to the average businessman, the public servant, you speak to parents, people are increasingly expressing hopelessness. And hopelessness because when they see the vision in front of them, things are not clear. They are not seeing a brighter tomorrow. Financially, socially, economically, no way are they seeing a brighter future. Everybody's complaining. Churches are complaining. Businesses are complaining. And so we Dominicans are at a stage where they have to be able to forcefully, without any means of the 70s, recognize that through this electoral reform process, through this confirmation process, they have to seize the opportunity and allow themselves to have a bright future by confirming, galvanizing support, and ensuring that everybody goes out and makes a bold statement that we need to have a change of government in Dominica. And that's the only way I think Dominicans can go forward. And we have to develop the attitude that If we vote in a government and it does not work, you move them out. Look at what's happening in the United Kingdom. Look at what has happened over the past 20 years. They have changed 8 prime ministers. In the past 10 years, they've changed 7 prime ministers. What is significant about what has happened in the United Kingdom yesterday is that we have Mr. Starmer, who won perhaps the greatest landslide victory in any election in the United Kingdom. And he, strange enough, was able to, they were able to remove him from office, not because there's any major social unrest in the United Kingdom, or there's any major economic downturn in the United Kingdom, or that there is any instability in the United Kingdom, is that people from within his ranks and the people of the United Kingdom lost faith in his ability to create for them a vision as to where he wanted to take the United Kingdom, that he had been vacillating and changing his position. And so because it was so opaque, because it was so cloudy, they decided, listen, Captain, you have to abandon ship because we cannot see our way through into. So although the waters were stable, the horizon was opaque. And that's what we have to look at today. What does Dominica future look like? Yes, there are great things happening. Yes, there are great people around us, but I think Dominica deserves more. I think the people of Dominica deserve more. I think the businessmen deserve much more than they're getting now. I think the average Dominican deserves much more than they are living in their daily lives today, and I think we have to give ourselves a chance and recognize that we have to climb out from the bottom of that precipice, as strenuous as it is going to be, and to be able to convince ourselves that we have to move away from that transactional kind of politics and the politics of popularity, because that has dwindled down socially into our society. Nobody wants to work anymore if you don't pay them something. Prostitution is rife. Drug abuse is rife. This transactional fever and spirit that this government has kind of imposed on the psyche of Dominicans, that in order to do anything, you have to be paid. You have to give me something, is not healthy for a democratic process. And to know, well, okay, we have to be so starry-eyed by popularity. Who is stronger, who is more popular, instead of who is more competent, who is capable, and who is able. We have to make that paradigm shift, and it is incumbent on Dominicans to tell themselves and to tell the authorities that, listen, we gave you an opportunity, you have squandered it. When we look at ourselves, we are not any better off compared to where you are right now. We would like to live the luxury that you're living. We would like to know that we have insurance, that we can buy our own insurance and our health care like you can. We want to know that we can have more than one house as you can. We want to know that we can send our children overseas as you can. That the life that you have become comfortable with, we want to be comfortable too, and we are not comfortable, because we are at a stage where we are not only on the edge of a precipice, we're at the bottom of a precipice, because the average Dominican cannot make ends meet. And everybody knows that. The average Dominican does not know tomorrow. People are now living not only from salary to salary, but from small loan to small loan. Okay? And that is something that is very troubling. You speak to many couples, you speak to married couples, you speak to family people, and you speak to people who are down there in the ordinary people, and they will tell you there are people who I'm not sure if we look at the number of death announcements that is being paid for by PAL reps. People can't even afford to bury their own parents anymore. Okay, and this notion that we have to be dependent, kind of mendicant mentality that has brought down, dehumanized people. And when you have to be postulating a kind of disrespect of the people of Dominica in governance. We had the President Charles Savre, who was sick, and he was kept in office for 2 years, being paid by the people of Dominica. We had the pilot from Granford who had a stroke, and he was paid for not functioning for more than a year or more by the people of Dominica. We had the former PAL rep from Granby, Mr. Fabien, my good friend and family, who was also sick, not performing. We had the last PAL rep for Goodwill, sick or not performing. And these people were being paid a hefty salary by the purse of the people of Dominica, when the average Dominican who is sick sometimes has to give up their job by many sectors of the economy. So we have that kind of disrespect and dishonesty that is beginning to pervade our society. We have this level of wholesale selling of people's dignity, and we have a lot of other we're becoming making our citizens of beggars. When I heard of what's been happening in the Rosenhof constituency, and I've seen it in the past elections, I have literally seen it as someone on the ground, okay? Turning your citizens into beggars, you know? And people are actually saying, for me to vote now, I have to be paid. There's a gentleman who regularly calls the radio and challenges the opposition that you have to give money for somebody to confirm and to vote. And that's what we have come to. And I think we have to, we are at a precipice. I'm not saying all is gloom and doom. Yes, on the brighter side, you know, Dominica is rich in terms of its resources. Our people are very talented, very innovative, very creative, but they need to be given a chance to be able to bring their creativity to the fore, to develop their innovation so that they can live, be happy and be self-fulfilled. And they have to be able to walk the supermarket shelves and walk around Roseau and see made in Dominica. We were like that before, you know. They have to be able to know, well, okay, when we look around that the buildings are being constructed by Dominicans with a trademark Dominican builders and contractors and architects labeled upon it. We have to be able to know, well, okay, that whatever we have comes from our toil and the sweat of our brow, so that we can become proud citizens anymore, okay, once more in our nation. And that is where we are at, and we need to rise up. We need to climb out of that, what I put decadence of dependency, mendicancy, and a feeling of inadequacy, so that we can be a people who are creative and proud. You know, we need to be proud as a people. What is the level of our pride now? How much rum we can drink, how much CO we can have. That's the level and how much we can be indecent at festivals and parties and look at the behavior. That is where our pride lies now. Pride ought to be on a level that when we look at who we are as a people, we can commend each other, we can endorse each other for who they are and what we can become. And that's where I think we need to be.
All right. So, Sylvia, thanks a lot for that. You'll get to make a closing remark, but I want to go to Alex, Professor Alex Bruno, to give his comments on this topic, whether Dominica is at a precipice. And then, Alex, you can consider this to be your closing remarks as well.
Okay, well, yes, we can be said to be steering right over a precipice precariously. In terms of the precipice being a metaphor for the economic challenges or dangers that face our country, if not addressed 15 years ago, can spell doom and gloom. The economist who leads the United Workers' Party, Thompson Fontaine, released a communique of his plans to increase the minimum wage of Dominica. In this economic situation, again, I do not know whose advice and why he felt that would be a great idea, but the businessman who's on the program with us, if he is prudent enough, would tell you that this does not seem to be a very popular idea, certainly not in the business sector, because things are already as challenging as they are. To threaten an increase in the minimum wage based on you winning an election cause people to start asking questions. No, I'm not going against challenging the leader, but we are speaking about doom and gloom. I'm speaking about economic challenges and what probably might be the best offering at this time. What about a sense of rejuvenated entrepreneurship in new areas to broaden the economy? Because we're already strapped as is, peeping over a precipice that if not handled 15 years ago, we are facing some economic loom. If anything happens, God forbid, to our CBI, we're going to have some problems. And the Rosa-North by-election can be a blueprint, but only if the elections are well managed, again, in the interest of our country, by the alternative. Simeon spoke very eloquently on that. The people are feeling as if there is nowhere to turn because there is no leadership, especially in the alternative, to inspire hope. And I'm an eternal optimist as well, as Gregor is, and Simeon to an extent. And all of us, we have hope in our people. And when our people see and believe that there is an alternative that can derive the fortunes that they seek, they will lean towards it. Dominicans are not dotish. Dominicans are not beggars, We will do what we have to do to survive, but when the time is right, we will take action. We are a people of action. And if there's anyone on this program who believes that the alternative has done good enough, well enough, to attract people away from the incumbent, well, I rest my case here. Simeon agrees with me that a regime change is the only way we are going to reap the fortunes that we need as a country. But how are we going to change the regime outside of a strategy? You want to have the muffler and the bumper, the new candidate here and everywhere. It's what has won the party. They have renewed their vibe and their mandate over by just doing things differently. It's a very old truck, but they put in new parts from Auto Trade and have it sounding good. And that is strategy. I mean, I don't want to talk about the opposition because people might think I'm targeting the opposition, but look at the contrast. What do we see? Some time ago, I did a poll that suggested 82% of Dominicans wanted change. And I was castigated. Right after my polls, the Labour Party went into Londonderry and changed 82% of their candidates. I think Mr. Skerry changed 19 of them. Some of them didn't even know they were going to be changed. They were changed on the day of. And I can speak to the fact that the Kalinago territory MP did not know. He cried. He walked out of his delegation. That is taking drastic action in the interest of winning an election. No, I'm not saying that workers and any other party should do that. But I'm saying at least you have to put up a front. Show at least that you are listening to people who understand how this thing works in the interest of our country, not your party. Because at the end of the day, it's not a party that's going to rescue Dominica, it's all us as a people. And all of us should be involved. Everybody in the program here should be involved, have a seat around the table. I mean, I must say, in Thompson's defense, I had a really good conversation with him a couple of days ago. He has noble intentions, but noble intentions alone is not it when you try to win an election. Again, no castigation, no criticism. I'm just saying that we start talking, let's continue talking, and let's do what is the best for our country, not necessarily for our party. So yes, Rosa-North could be a blueprint, but it is to the extent that we make it a blueprint and how we apply strategy, how we get people to register or reconfirm, how we get out the vote, how we be futuristic, how we present candidate that shows that they have 20, 30 years in them to build a future. I'm not saying anything wrong with any candidate now, but we have to be very strategic about the people and how we choose them. Or if you choose someone who might not be too futuristic, say something in the campaign that suggests they're just transitory. But something has to be done, and people must see as if there is some thought process behind what we do in the alternative. And if we don't, I'm not sure that we can really use Rosa as a blueprint, Rosa-North, because chances are the Red Party might win it. That does not mean that they're the future. It means they had a better ground game. I think at the end of the day, If we do what we have to do and we bring all the right energies to play, Rosanov can be a blueprint, but only if the opposition is able to salvage a win. If the Red Party wins, it is just the same old and the same old, and we live to fight another day. And that is my overall.
Okay, so your
view,
audio is...
and that the best strategy and only way forward for Dominica is a regime change. Change the government, and we have a chance to fix our country. But we should change that government 15 years ago. We can still do it now. It's a little late, but if we do it, I see we have the energy, we have the skills, we have the expertise to fix our country. It doesn't take long, because again, Gregor could tell you, he manages a very large company, not just here, many places. And Dominica is a very interesting case. It's a small case, difficult case, but it's not an impossible case to manage. If we have the right energy in the right places and we take the right decisions and we prioritize what is correct for Dominica. I mean, I went to a game and there were 67,000 people at the game. Dominica's population in one area. So we are a small country. We are a nation, a big nation, but we are still a small country with unique challenges. And with the right management, the right people in the right places, I think Dominica's problems can be fixed in about 10 to 15 years, I believe.
Well, thanks a lot for his closing remarks, Alex. Appreciate that. Gregor, I mean, time to wind down now. So could you have your closing remarks? Gregor, I don't know if you're hearing me.
Hi,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
I am. No, I mean, I think the country is not on the right development path. I'm very concerned. I think that the democratic process is the only way to change things. I think the independence of the commission is a key part of that. And I have faith in the Dominica people, and I believe there's a lot of work that needs to be done to present a vision for the country that appeals to the population. And we can sit here on the panel and say that the country needs to change, and we need to change this, and we need to change that. But at the end, the people of Dominica that make that choice. And that is where the focus has to be, to register, to confirm, to present a vision and a viable way forward for the country. I will only say that personally, I believe that we have remarkable opportunities for the country, for the future, for the people. And we need to bridge the gap with the reality we're facing now and with the future potential that exists for the country. And that's a short walk, that's a long walk. And I think it's one that we have to be committed to. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gregor, for that. I'm sure we'll hear from you again, because I think you're really concerned about Dominica. I've heard you say that Dominica is a beautiful country with lots of potential, and you are in fact interested in helping the country along. So I mean, congratulations for that. Simeon, would you like to make a final closing remark, a brief closing remark?
Yeah, sure. Very brief. I will say in closing that when elections are stolen, the will of the people is destroyed. So we have discussed electoral reform, we have discussed the CBI program tonight, and we need to be reminded of the connection between free and fair elections and the development of a country. Dominica is a case study of, among many other countries in the world, but perhaps I think is the most striking case study in the Caribbean, where the lack of free and fair elections leads to the underdevelopment of a people. And that's a very serious consequence that we have to bear. And so I would like to encourage the people of Dominica tonight to embrace the opportunity for their own development, their integral development as people, as well as the development of a country. and to embrace the opportunity to ensure that any electoral process in Dominica is free and fair, so that the will of the people of Dominica can reach its full potential.
Thank you, Simeon. Let me just, as I go to Dr. Andre for his final word, let me just acknowledge all these folks who are with us on Facebook and in YouTube, and let me just take just one brief comment from somebody on Facebook. His person says, I think Gregor Nassif getting into the political ring at this time would bring some excitement, his business acumen and so on and so on. Gregor, I think this is a comment is directed at you. I don't know what plans you have or what interests you have, but you don't have to talk about it now. So let me go to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his final word tonight.
Well, let me commend all the panelists. I think the presentations were excellent, quite frankly. And I think as long as we have that caliber of folk speaking on one cause, which is the cause of righteousness and justice and fairness, I think there is always hope. We started with that metaphor about Dominica being on the edge of a precipice. In fact, Simeon is probably right. We are actually in the precipice, because go to Des Blanches and you'll see how deep the precipice is as we speak. And the precipice itself represents how low we have sunk, quite frankly, in terms of those values that we have cherished over decades of being in Dominica. But there is hope. There is hope because every day you have a new voice coming on the scene, some not as eloquent or vociferous, not so much vociferous as clear and eloquent as Gregor, but other voices, quite frankly, embracing the cause of fair pay and decency in government, realizing that self-interest is not a basis to build a country. You needed to build a country based on your collective spirit, your spirit that dictates that the country is as strong or as weak as the poorest or the most sickly of our brethren, and that we have an obligation to try to uplift the community, because quite frankly, as I always say in court, there are no penal colonies out there again. The chickens will come to roost after they've served their time at what's the name of the place? Stock Farm. So we have an interest in ensuring that everyone receives an equal opportunity to uplift himself or herself. Everyone can be a doctor, successful businessman, sociologists, professors, and so on. But everyone can nurture his or her God-given talents. And everyone deserves to have the enabling environment to do precisely that. That is why, if we focus on harnessing the resources that we have in our population, we will do more for Dominica than any foreign entity who looks for duty-free concessions and get the hell out of the place. We have to get rid of this self-hatred that dictates that foreign folks seem to have the panacea in terms of uplifting Dominica while we don't. We need to get rid of that yoke of dependency where we decide or we look for a messiah as a leader. Leadership rests within each and every one of us. And if we adopt that perspective, then we come to the instant realization that we can each make a meaningful contribution to the cause of upliftment and the cause of democracy and the cause of development. We don't need a messiah. Or as Tina Turner sings, we don't need another hero. We need the heroes that walk among us, those we tend to overlook historically, those who would believe they don't have the credentials, whether societal credentials or otherwise, or education. The brightest person I have read about in the Caribbean never went to university. His name was C.L.R. James. Wrote some of the most brilliant books on West Indies history, sports, than anybody with 4 or 5 degrees. So let us get rid of that slavish mentality that dictates that because we may have 1, 2, 3 degrees, somehow we know better than everybody. Let us realize that these degrees are basically the fulfillment of the meeting of the minimum requirements for those kinds of accolades. Let us try to teach each person as a contributor to the cause of Dominica. And let us try to support and empower each of those who aspire and who's realized that there is something fundamentally wrong in Dominica, and who will not just sit and say 1,000 novenas, but who is prepared to work and pray to achieve what is deserving of all Dominicans. So I hope if, in fact, any of your listeners take just one simple message, it is that our resuscitation, our redemption from a temporal basis rests within each and every Dominican, quite frankly. If we don't have that mentality as we speak now, then all is lost. But I will go on the record to say I believe that many Dominicans think that way, but they're still afraid of the sword of retribution which is hanging over their necks, which is one of the biggest impediments in Dominicans getting involved in uplifting themselves, the fear of retribution. But hopefully that fear is dissipating day after day. And once it is fully dissipated, I think the cause would have been won. So that is what I can say, and leave to the folks that the cause or success or redemption is not too far off, quite frankly. Thank you. Good night. And thank you to all the panelists and you, Mr. Gregoire and Lambie, who's taking a little nap, and what's his name again?
Sure.
Yeah,
well, thank you to all the folks on Facebook and on YouTube who stayed with us throughout the night, and all the people who are listening on the radio, in their vehicles, from the offices, wherever on the internet, or listening to the stream in some way on their cell phones or whatever. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you, Simeon. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Gregor. I mean, I hope that you will be joining us again for another discussion in the future. Thank you, Dr. Irving Andre, for your wonderful closing, the final word. And just let me say good night to everybody. I hope everybody had a great Father's Day and enjoy the rest of your evening, or what's left of it in your case, Gregor. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Good night, folks.
The Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. Charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty. Embracing justice, peace, and togetherness. The Global View on Q. Networking Dominica with the rest of the world. The experts are in the house.